Welcome back to teeZee Book Reviews. I'm Jessica, and today we're diving into a fascinating book that's been making waves, Nexus by Yuval Noah Harari. If you've read Sapiens or Homo Deus, you know Harari has a knack for connecting the dots between history, technology, and the future. But in Nexus, he tackles something truly foundational, the evolution of information networks. Brian, are you ready to unpack this?
Absolutely, Jessica. Nexus is such a thought-provoking book. Harari starts by tracing humanity's journey from oral traditions all the way to artificial intelligence. And what struck me the most is his argument that information networks, whether they're as simple as storytelling or as complex as AI, are the real backbone of human civilization. He's saying it's not just about tools or technology. It's about how we share and process information together.
Right. And he frames it all through this idea of shared narratives, or what he calls intersubjective realities. These are stories or beliefs that don't just exist in one person's mind, but are shared among groups. They're what make nations, religions, and even financial systems possible. It's such a simple yet powerful concept, don't you think?
It really is. And what blew my mind was his point that these narratives aren't about truth. They're about connection. A narrative doesn't have to be factual to be effective. It just has to bring people together. That's how myths and religions shaped early societies. But the same principle applies to modern systems like capitalism or even social media algorithms. It's all about creating shared meaning.
Exactly. And it's not just about unity, it's also about power. Harari really delves into how those who control the narratives often hold the most influence. For example, in the first part of the book, he examines how the invention of writing transformed societies. It allowed for bureaucracy to emerge, which could organize massive populations, but also became a tool for control. Did any specific example stand out to you, Brian?
Yeah, the story about his grandfather fleeing the bureaucratic persecution in Romania was haunting. Harari uses it to show that bureaucracies, for all their efficiency, can also be cold, inflexible, and downright dangerous. And it's not just a historical issue. He connects it to how algorithms today are essentially modern bureaucrats, making decisions about credit scores, hiring, or even parole.
That was such a powerful connection. And in part two, he shifts to the modern era, where computers and the internet have fundamentally changed how information flows. One of the most surprising points he makes is about the role of cat images in AI development. I mean, who would have thought that millions of people uploading cat photos helped advance neural networks?
That part cracked me up. But it's also a perfect example of how unpredictable the consequences of technology can be. Harari argues that we often create powerful systems, whether it's religion, bureaucracy, or AI, without fully understanding their unintended consequences. And that's a recurring theme throughout the book. We're great at building systems, but not always at controlling them.
Right. And he really drives that home in part three, where he focuses on AI and what he calls computer politics. One of the key issues he raises is the alignment problem, ensuring that AI systems align with human values. It's such a complex challenge because, as Harari points out, even we humans don't always agree on what our values are.
Exactly, and he also explores how AI could disrupt power structures. He warns that AI doesn't just amplify information, it can manipulate it. Think about how algorithms shape what we see on social media or what we believe about the world. Harari argues that in the wrong hands, this could lead to new forms of social control. That's both fascinating and terrifying.
Terrifying is right. But what I appreciate about Harari is that he doesn't just dwell on the risks, he also highlights solutions. One of his big takeaways is the need for self-correcting mechanisms in any system, whether it's a government, a scientific institution, or an AI. Without those mechanisms, systems can become rigid, dogmatic, and ultimately self-destructive.
Yeah, and he ties that idea back to global cooperation. Harari makes a strong case that challenges like AI and climate change are too big for any one nation to tackle alone. He says we need to rethink how we collaborate internationally because these issues transcend borders. It's a call to action that feels more urgent than ever.
Absolutely. And that ties into another theme that really resonated with me: the balance between truth and order. Harari argues that while a free flow of information is essential for discovering truth, it can also destabilize societies. Conversely, too much control over information can suppress truth and lead to stagnation. Finding that balance is such a delicate task.
It really is. And speaking of balance, one of the most surprising ideas in the book was his argument about conservatism. Harari claims that the rapid pace of technological change has turned many conservative movements into radical forces. Instead of preserving tradition, they're now embracing disruptive technologies in ways that contradict their original goals. It's such a counterintuitive observation.
Totally. And it highlights how even movements that claim to resist change can't escape it. Harari's point is that change is inevitable, and the key is learning how to adapt wisely. He emphasizes lifelong learning and critical thinking as essential skills for navigating the 21st century.
Yes, and I think that's one of the most actionable lessons from the book. In this age of information overload, we have to be critical of what we consume and question our assumptions. Harari even warns about the dangers of AI-generated content, which can be incredibly convincing but not necessarily truthful. It's a reminder to stay vigilant.
Absolutely. Another lesson that stuck with me is the importance of transparency and accountability, especially as AI becomes more prevalent. Harari argues that we need to demand clear explanations for how algorithms work and who's responsible for their decisions. Without that transparency, it's too easy for these systems to perpetuate bias or discrimination.
And he doesn't stop there. Harari also calls for cultivating wisdom, not just intelligence or knowledge, but wisdom. That means thinking about the long-term consequences of our actions, recognizing how interconnected everything is, and prioritizing human well-being over technological advancement. It's such a grounded human perspective.
Yes, and it connects beautifully to his earlier works like Sapiens and Homo Deus. If Sapiens was about understanding our past and Homo Deus was about envisioning our future, Nexus is the bridge that links them. It's about understanding how information networks have shaped our journey and how they'll shape what's to come.
Well said, Jessica. And I think Harari's ultimate message is one of hope. Even though the challenges we face are immense, he believes we have the tools to navigate them if we make the right choices. It's a call to be proactive, to think critically, and to work together globally.
Exactly. And on that hopeful note, we're out of time for today. If you haven't read Nexus yet, we highly recommend it. It's a masterclass in understanding the forces shaping our world. Thanks for joining us on teeZee Book Reviews. We'll see you next time.